Hey pal, welcome to another episode of What I Watched This Month, November edition. I started this month with Pulse, directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. At this point, I'm a pretty big Kurosawa head. I love pretty much everything he does, which is to say, everything he does here with cyber horror, if we want to call it that, dark rooms, psychological thrills, and carefully paced scares, is pretty up my alley. All that said, I probably got the least out of this one compared to everything else I've seen from him, probably because I just find Cloud to be a lot more relevant and refined about the horrors of the internet, and Cure is just a flat-out masterpiece. Here, while there are definitely more horrifying moments and a thick sense of atmosphere, I wasn't super on board with what he was doing story-wise. I actually felt surprisingly lost here and there in the narrative, and the ending felt really tacked on, in my opinion. All that said though, I thoroughly enjoyed this and will probably dig it more on a rewatch someday. Then I watched Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This is a classic environmental horror film from the 70s that I kinda always assumed I wouldn't love. I don't know why. Because Donald Sutherland is basically doing his own version of Elliot Gould in The Long Goodbye here, which I famously adore. This is a lot of fun. All the performances here are very colorful, the cinematography is playful and at times bizarre. This concept of aliens living amongst us disguised as humans is nothing new. We're still doing that. Yet this is one of the most concentrated takes on this story. It's one of my favorite that I've seen. I was a big fan. Then I watched Two Sleepy People. I actually caught this with the cast and crew at a special outdoor screening in Yosemite. Thank you, Camp Studios, for inviting me to that. It was an unforgettable experience. I was there for a week, which is why I didn't watch a ton of stuff this month, but all that said, I enjoyed the film. Though it is very much a debut feature, Baron Ryan shows a lot of promise, both on screen and in the script. The writing is painfully honest. Both him and Caroline Grossman play off each other really well. The cinematography is very punch-drunk love in the best way. It's exciting to see creators out here doing the damn thing from the ground up. It's a step into a very exciting direction for filmmaking, and I can't wait to see more. And I watched Walkabout. This is about two kids who must traverse across the Australian desert. I'll let you figure out why that is. This is an incredibly psychedelic watch. Rogue captures the desert in so many unique, beautiful, and mostly terrifying ways. I can't say I've ever seen or heard this part of the world this way before. That alone is reason enough to check it out, but as a film about colonialism, coming of age, and human nature, it's pretty enlightening. I always feel like it's a bit of a cop-out to call something very human, because what exactly does that mean? But this, more than a lot of what I've seen in my life, feels very human. I mean, it gets to the bottom of what it means to be a person existing in the world. It might not be everyone's cup of tea. You could call it a bit of a slow burn, but I was pretty mesmerized by this one. Then I watched Peter Hujar's Day. This is the latest from Ira Sachs, his much anticipated follow-up to 2023's Passages, one of my favorites of that year, and it is a tight 70-minute film about photographer Peter Hujar retelling a day in his life. While that is literally what you get, it'd feel dismissive to call this film just that. Don't get it twisted, this is not just a pretty looking podcast. To me, it read as a snapshot into a period of time, 70s New York, and experiencing that era through Hujar's storytelling and through the cinematography. You never leave the apartment space. The film starts and ends with his retelling, nothing more or less. It breaks the fourth wall a handful of times, acknowledging that you are in fact watching a movie. And to me, all of these elements combined gave it a sense of melancholy, the feeling of never fully existing in the present moment. Stories, films, and conversations with friends are all we have as a means of holding on to these times of our lives, of these memories. There is more to it than that, but I found that alone to be incredibly beautiful. It's one of those films that leaves room for your mind to wander like that, and personally, I'm a huge fan of that stuff. Then I watched Happiness, my first Todd Solondz, believe it or not. Oh boy. Off the bat, I really loved this, if you can't tell from the 5-star rating, which shouldn't come off as much of a surprise considering how much I also love the work of John Waters, Yorgos Lanthimos, David Lynch, and Greener Grass from a couple years ago. This feels like the biggest and boldest take on uncovering the superficiality and darkness of American suburbia. It's true, this is one of the most disturbing films out there, but never in poor taste, perhaps because it has a genuine curiosity and desire to get close to its characters, specifically speaking about Dylan Baker's character Bill, which is one of the greatest performances I've ever seen, period. By being uncomfortably transparent, the film miraculously, and I mean miraculously, ends up being hilarious at the same time. You almost have to laugh at some of these scenes just to get through them. To me, every scene, performance, and storyline here is perfectly executed. In my mind, this stands amongst some of the greats as one of the most vivid cinematic portraits of American life in the ugliest way possible. loved it. Then I watched Train Dreams. This is a new release starring Joel Edgerton that's only grown on me since seeing it. On the surface, this is a fairly quiet film about a man's life working in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, but really, to me, it's a film about loss, stability, and our relationship to the natural world, amongst a wide range of other topics it impressively handles for such a brief runtime. The film's unassuming nature works incredibly well with what it's trying to say about how slippery time is, how loss can happen quickly and unexpectedly, and how we're never able to make sense of anything, no matter how stable and simple the life we carved out for ourselves is. I find all of that really beautiful. My one gripe is I think the narration on this one, paired with an overly sentimental score at times, takes away from its goals of painting out this quaint and quiet life. It feels a little hammed up at times, but who knows? Maybe that stuff will brush away on the inevitable next viewing. I found this very lovely. Then I watched Nobody. Been meaning to get around to these films for a while, and I'm kind of like, what was all the hype about? I mean, sure, the bus sequence is pretty undeniable, and I'm never really going to complain about watching Bob Odenkirk in anything, but I found this pretty stale as far as dad action goes. The script is very corny, and more than anything, a bit boring to me personally. There's nothing in here that I haven't already seen done before and better. I think this does inch towards some interesting ideas about men this age living these kinds of expected lifestyles in today's world, and where they put their energy and pent-up aggression, but who are we kidding? It's mostly concerned with building out a thrilling action plot. Doesn't go too deep with anything it has to say. It's not really my thing if you can't tell, but I'm glad the rest of the world had fun with this. Then I rewatched Wicked. I liked this a lot more on a rewatch, I gotta say. My distaste for this during award season last year grew so strong that I was actually surprised I initially gave it a 3 and not something much lower. So you can imagine what it felt like to actually enjoy watching it on a rewatch. Yes, the music is very good. Grande and Arrivo are also very good. The story, very good. There's some god-awful cinematography and direction, but that aside, this is mostly inoffensive in my book. Then I watched Contempt. Been years since I've watched a Godard film, and it still goes down just the same. As is usually the case with Godard, this is more of a thinker than a feeler, and it's one of his better thinkers that I've seen. I actually don't think I've seen a Godard so assured of itself. He shoots with a lot more confidence and intention here, which leads to some pretty jaw-dropping moments from time to time, speaking specifically about one of the final shots in the film, with the main character resting up against a cliff. Also, his sheer honesty about the corruption of Hollywood filmmaking and why that matters to everyone is deeply refreshing, even now. Nobody has this kind of bite anymore. I know why, because it's a bit ruthless, but still, he gets carried away here and there. The apartment sequence specifically felt pretty unfocused, but I liked this a lot. Need to tap back into his filmography one of these days. Then I rewatched Surat. This is still just as intense the second time around, solidifying it as one of my favorite movies of this year. Off the jump, this is a very intense movie sonically. The pulsing techno fills you with dread, and where it takes you is somehow much darker than you ever anticipated. I have a soft spot for movies that go, what's the worst thing that could happen? What's the nightmare? And then executing that nightmare in a way that still ends up shocking me. But more importantly, it's how the filmmaker guides the character out of that nightmare and into a surreal cinematic abyss that really stuck with me. I know everything I've said about this in this video so far is pretty abstract. I'm not really getting into the details of it. That's for two reasons. A, I want you to go see this without knowing a damn thing about it. And B, I'll be talking much more about it in my end of the year video because, like I said, it's one of the best movies of this year. Then I watched Wicked for Good. Yeah, honestly, a week later, it's honestly aged even worse in my mind. Unlike the first Wicked, this ultimately just doesn't have much staying power. There's nothing to chew on, just a story recklessly chugging along to the finish line, which, you know, that's fine with me. More thoughts on this in my full video for it. Then I watched If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. I was admittedly a bit scared to dive into this one. All I'd heard was that it's basically uncut gems for motherhood, which didn't actually sound like a great time. And as expected, it's not, but it's a really good movie. I feel like Uncut Gems comparisons get thrown around a lot these days, but this one really earns it, and I should note, certainly carves out a path of its own, too. Everything about this is completely suffocating and unenjoyable. In that way, it's both a very effective portrayal of raising a child, and more specifically, raising a child in today's hellscape. Rose Byrne dishes out one of the most impressive performances of the year. She never overacts, rather, she meets the film on its own unhinged wavelength. It's a pretty unhinged movie, and like Surat, is another one where I'll be talking a lot more about it at the end of the year. Then I watched Rio Bravo. This is a classic Howard Hawks Western, my first into that specific but significant side of his filmography. And I can't really say I've seen a Western this chill before. It's basically a hangout film with John Wayne at the center of it. I should note it's one of the first hangout films, which works a lot better than it should. This is the type of thing that I really wish I could have seen on the big screen, as these looser hangout flicks, to me, unleash their full power when experienced in a dark room with a crowd of strangers. But I really enjoyed this. It's a fun movie to just kind of hang out with for a few hours, even though I had zero clue what I was getting into when I threw it on. Then I watched The Running Man. Like many of you, I've been an Edgar Wright fan for many years. He's an important filmmaker in my own history as a film fan. I went into this with pretty low expectations considering what I've been hearing. And all that said, I liked it a lot more than I was expecting to. Sure, there are some major flaws here, like the third act, which totally shits the bed and feels like it was cut together way too quickly. And it does lack the same spark that made Wright who he is. I don't think anyone is going to watch this and fall in love with the art form the way many people did with Scott Pilgrim, Hot Fuzz, and even Baby Driver. But it's still incredibly entertaining, and Glenn Powell really gets his time in the spotlight with this one. There's a lot of energy here, and it comes through. I felt that energy. I've realized I'm a bit hard to please when it comes to modern action movies. They aren't usually my cup of tea, so to come out of this with a smile on my face, I'd call that a success. Then I watched Splitsville. This is a polyamorous screwball comedy starring the guy who directed 80 for Brady. Need I say more? Truthfully though, I've been eagerly waiting for Kyle Marvin and Michelangelo Covino's follow-up to The Climb for years, and this is pretty much a step up in every single way. Covino has a pretty understated way of directing that may come off minimalist, but is pretty astounding. Not many filmmakers, writers, actors, etc. can do the single-shot coverage thing this well anymore, without it feeling gimmicky. I'm also just shocked a polyamorous rom-com hasn't been done to this degree before. This squeezes every bit of potential out of that concept. It is simply one of the silliest movies I've seen this year. It is the superior Dakota Johnson rom-com that I've seen this year. Definitely worth making the time for. Then I watched My Cousin Vinny for the broadcast. Huge blind spot for years, and I'm glad I didn't let this one slip by me. This is ultimately just a really lighthearted and easygoing courtroom comedy, but where it really shines is in the performances by Joe Pesci and especially Marissa Tomei. Half the reviews for this on Letterboxd are about how beautiful Tomei is, and I see why. Not a lot of people have looked this good on camera before. I'm probably still more of a Legally Blonde enjoyer when it comes to legal comedies, but I had a very good time with this. And I watched Zootopia 2. I already did a video on this, but for being one of the most financially successful movies of the century so far, this is pretty great. Very enjoyable, very funny, very nice to look at. A snappy and stylish animated blockbuster that reminds you how good these kinds of movies can be when they lock in. I'll probably end up watching this again at some point in my life, and I'm fine with that. Then I watched The Town. It is hilarious to me how good Ben Affleck is at directing, and also how humorless this film is. It comes around to being really funny somehow, even though there aren't really any jokes here. The energy of this is just so macho and intense that it completely captivated me, and I also couldn't take any of it seriously. I loved it. I wish these kinds of sincere and committed crime movies happened more often these days, or maybe I'm just not looking in the right places. This is just one of those that I liked and can't really explain why. That's all I have to say about The Town. Then I finished the month with a rewatch of Frankenstein. Liked this a lot more on a rewatch. The first act was actually a lot more interesting than I initially gave it credit for. Maybe this is just because I knew how the second act would go down, but I was able to appreciate the attention to Victor's upbringing a bit more, as well as some of the wordier philosophical tangents the film would go off on. I still think Guillermo del Toro is better when he's a bit tighter, and there are stretches in here that feel pretty unfocused and self-indulgent, but it is an undeniably well-crafted flick that did move me with time. I've also been watching Pluribus. We're still in the early stages of what feels like a pretty big idea for Vince Gilligan, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but I like it. I don't love it. The concept is fascinating, and I love how it is very obviously about Gilligan's feelings on AI and how crazy it feels to live in today's world, but it feels a bit dry so far, at least compared to those early episodes of Breaking Bad. I am fully aware it's going to get a lot better, so again, take this all with a grain of salt, but that's how I feel about it. I've also been watching I Love LA, and this is one I feel like I have to defend a bit. I like this a lot more than most people. The dialogue looks pretty dicey out of context on Twitter, but that's not how you're supposed to watch a show. It works really well in the context of these episodes. There's a real rhythm to the way they speak that works really well on me. It's also a great satire on LA, and I don't know, man, I'm laughing. I'm having a good time. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing, but I'd watch like 8 more seasons of this if I had to. And I've also been watching The Chair Company. Would it be crazy to call this my favorite Tim Robinson project so far? Because it just might be. I've always felt that Robinson's style, while always funny, runs the risk of feeling a bit repetitive and not gelling with a traditional narrative structure. Friendship was obviously great, but the film itself never outperformed Tim Robinson's isolated bits, if that makes sense. But here, everything clicks together. The story is so bizarre, the characters are so strange. Tim Robinson feels right at home navigating it all. In a TV landscape where so many shows are trying to be the capital W weird one, this is one of the only true weird pieces of TV I've seen out there. I'm very happy there's going to be another season, and I can't believe there's going to be another season. To the Andor and Pitt enthusiasts, I did not forget about you. I'm going to finish these shows soon. Just be patient. I take my time with TV. And hey, that's what I watched this month. What do you watch? Let me know. Thanks for watching. Go watch these movies and shows and form your own opinions. And if you're looking for something to watch next month, you should really check out this week's sponsor, Mubi. Mubi is a curated streaming service, a place to watch beautiful, interesting, and incredible cinema. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected by its team of curators. Discover the best of cinema at your fingertips, streaming anytime, anywhere. They actually just unveiled this wonderful new collection called Food and Film, which consists of several different films that relate to food, that include food, that film food in some interesting way. From tasty treats to inventive concoctions, this mouth-watering collection offers much to chew on. I'm really looking forward to checking it out in December. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/Karsten. That's mubi.com/Karsten for a whole month of amazing cinema for free.